Imagine a house that has seen generations of suffering, its walls soaked with fear, its air thick with the weight of untold secrets. Ashford Manor wasn't just any mansion, it was a prison for the souls trapped within, haunted by the malevolent spirit of Edgar Blackwood, a man whose cruelty knew no bounds. For years, the mansion lay dormant, abandoned, or so it seemed. But when Detective Aaron Hayes is called to investigate the strange disappearances surrounding the manor, he uncovers a nightmare far worse than he ever imagined. People are vanishing. Whispers of ghostly figures fill the night air, and something dark is stirring in the shadows. What he thought was a simple case quickly becomes a race against time to solve a murder that has haunted the manor for over a century, and stop a spirit determined to drag anyone who steps foot inside into its endless abyss. The question isn't just about solving a crime. The question is, can Aaron escape the grip of Ashford Manor before it claims him too? Stay tuned, because this is no ordinary ghost story. This is a journey into a place where the past never truly dies, and the horrors that await might just be waiting for you as well. In the quiet town of Ashford, known for its friendly neighbors and timeless charm, the recent disappearance of a young woman named Clara James has shaken everyone. It's not the first time someone has vanished, but Clara's case feels different. There's an eerie undertone lingering in the air, one that no one can quite explain. The whispers started late one night, as townspeople swore they heard a faint, eerie voice coming from Ashford Manor, an abandoned mansion on the edge of town. The locals avoided the manor. Some claimed it was cursed, others called it haunted. Clara was last seen on the road leading to the old mansion, but no one could explain why she would have been there. Detective Aaron Hayes, known for his sharp instincts and an unusual affinity for unsolved cases, had been assigned to Clara's disappearance. Upon arrival, he quickly sensed something was off. The mansion stood ominously in the distance, almost as if it were watching him. It was cold, darker than he remembered, and the closer he got, the more he could feel an indescribable weight pressing down on him. In his investigation, Aaron found a single shoe on the path leading to the manor. It belonged to Clara. Just as he knelt down to examine it, he heard it, a soft whisper carried by the wind. The words were unclear, but the chilling tone was enough to send a shiver down his spine. As Aaron looked up, he thought he saw a shadow moving near the entrance of the mansion. Yet, when he approached, there was no one in sight. The townsfolk warned him to leave, to forget the case, but Aaron knew he couldn't. Something drew him to the mansion, something unexplainable. And so, with a flashlight in hand and determination in his eyes, he entered the manor, unaware of the darkness waiting within. Detective Aaron Hayes stepped into Ashford Manor, his flashlight casting narrow beams along the peeling wallpaper and dusty wooden floors. The silence was so thick it felt like the house itself was holding its breath. As he moved deeper inside, an unnatural chill seeped into his bones. The air smelled of mildew and something faintly metallic, a scent that made his instincts tingle with warning. He'd read about the manor's dark history, how, decades ago, it was the site of strange disappearances, all of which remained unsolved. Ashford Manor was said to hold secrets, whispers of horror that never saw the light of day. Aaron's footsteps echoed through the narrow hallway, their sounds swallowed by the darkness ahead. He reached the main foyer, where a grand staircase loomed, twisting into the shadows above. As he raised his flashlight to inspect the staircase, something caught his eye, a faint outline on the steps, like a footprint. He leaned in closer and saw that the dust had been disturbed recently, leading up to the second floor. A shiver ran down his spine. As he climbed, the floor creaked with every step, the sound merging with an occasional whisper, so faint that he couldn't be sure it was real. But it grew louder, drawing him further, almost guiding him to the landing at the top. Then, just as he turned the corner, he froze. A figure stood at the end of the hallway. It was a woman in a pale dress, her face obscured by a veil of shadow. Aaron's heart pounded as he called out, "Clara?" The woman didn't move. She was eerily still, like she was waiting for something or someone. Suddenly, her head tilted, as if acknowledging his presence, but before he could take another step, she vanished, slipping back into the darkness as if she'd never been there. Aaron's breath caught. He knew what he had seen. Determined, he moved down the hallway, following where the figure had been. As he reached the door at the end, he grasped the handle, hesitated for a moment, and pushed it open. The room was cold, with shadows cast across the walls from his flashlight, and there, on the floor, he found something that made his heart race. A locket with Clara's initials, stained with a dark, dried substance. As Aaron picked it up, a single whisper echoed in his ear, chilling him to the core. "Help me!" Then silence. Detective Aaron Hayes stared at the locket in his hand, the dried, dark stain on its surface casting a heavy shadow over his thoughts. He turned it over, finding Clara's initials carefully engraved, like a silent cry for help. He pocketed the locket, knowing it was his only link to her last moments in this place. Just then, he heard footsteps, light, soft, moving down the hallway. He spun around, his flashlight sweeping over the empty space, but there was no one there. The footsteps grew faint, then disappeared entirely. But the silence that followed felt alive. Feeling a chill creeping up his spine, he moved further down the hallway, stopping before an old, heavy door at the far end. This door was different. Newer, as though it had been replaced recently. Cautiously, he twisted the knob and pushed it open. Inside, the room was dim, with moonlight seeping through the cracked windows, casting an eerie glow. The air was thick, and Aaron's breathing sounded louder than usual. Scattered across a dusty table were faded photographs and notes written in an unfamiliar hand. He examined one of the photos, and his pulse quickened. A young woman, strikingly similar to Clara, stared back at him with a hauntingly familiar look in her eyes. Aaron's fingers trembled as he scanned the other photographs. Each image showed a different woman, all bearing an unsettling resemblance to Clara. His mind raced as he pieced together a horrifying theory. Whoever had been here before him had an obsession, one that spanned decades. As he continued sifting through the photos, something in the corner of the room caught his attention. A crumbling old journal. Its pages were brittle, yellowed with age, and filled with scrawled entries that barely made sense. He turned to the first page and read the words aloud, barely a whisper. "She calls to me, night after night. She never lets me go." The words echoed in his mind, sending a chill down his spine. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Just then, the door behind him creaked shut, and the temperature in the room plummeted. His flashlight flickered, and he heard a faint sobbing sound, like a distant cry. It was coming from somewhere in the room, though no one else was there. He tried to steady his breathing, but the sobbing grew louder, filling the room with an overwhelming sense of grief and despair. Suddenly, the journal in his hands began to shake, vibrating violently before slipping from his grip and landing on the floor with a loud thud. The sobbing ceased instantly, replaced by a chilling silence. Aaron bent down to retrieve the journal, but his hand froze halfway as he saw a message scrawled across the page that hadn't been there before. In dark, ink-like scratches, it read, "Leave or become one of us." His heart pounded as he backed out of the room, his hand on the locket in his pocket. But as he turned to leave, he caught one last glimpse of the photograph on the table, and his blood ran cold. Detective Aaron Hayes felt a shiver crawl up his spine as he left the dim room behind him. But he was unable to shake the feeling of Clara's haunted gaze from his mind. The deeper he moved into Ashford Manor, the heavier the atmosphere grew, as if the house itself was alive, wrapping its dark history around him. He found himself in a narrow corridor leading to a small, plain door at the end. It wasn't on the blueprints of the manor that he'd studied. In fact, this entire section seemed to exist outside the known layout of the house. Curiosity and a growing dread urged him forward. As he opened the door, he stepped into a windowless room. It was barren, except for a few scattered pieces of broken furniture and a faded, moth-eaten rug. Aaron shone his flashlight around the room, searching for clues when he noticed scratch marks on the walls. They appeared old, yet desperate, as though someone, or something, had been clawing to get out. The door suddenly swung shut behind him with a resounding thud. Aaron rushed back and twisted the knob, but it wouldn't budge. A sense of panic began to rise in his chest as he pulled harder, but it was no use. He was trapped. "Calm down," he told himself, fighting to keep control. But as he turned around, the faint sound of humming filled the air, soft and chilling. It was the melody of a lullaby, drifting through the room as though carried by an invisible breeze. He scanned the room, but no one was there. The melody grew louder, twisting into a mournful tune that seemed to pierce his mind. Then he noticed something etched into the floor beneath the rug. He lifted the edge to reveal words carved deeply into the wood. "No one leaves. Not alive." His heart pounded as he tried to make sense of the message. Just as he stood to examine the room further, he heard it. A voice, soft but desperate. "Aaron." The voice was faint, almost like a sigh. He spun around, his flashlight slicing through the dark, but the room was empty. Yet he knew that voice. It was Clara's. "Help me," the voice whispered again, filled with sorrow and terror. "Clara?" Aaron called out, his voice trembling. "Where are you?" But the voice faded, leaving only silence and the faint hum of the eerie lullaby echoing in his ears. He frantically searched the room, banging on the walls, hoping for some hidden passage or door. But the walls remained silent and unyielding. Desperation clawed at him as the air grew colder. His breath hung in icy clouds, and a thick mist began to gather on the floor, swirling around his feet. As he read the last words, a gust of wind swept through the room, blowing out the single candle he'd lit. Aaron's flashlight flickered, and the temperature plummeted. From the corner of the room, a faint shadow stirred, slowly unfurling and taking shape. It seemed to rise from the darkness itself, solidifying into a figure shrouded in black, its face hidden beneath a hood. Aaron took a step back, his heart pounding as the shadowy figure turned towards him, its hollow gaze piercing through the darkness. "Aaron," the voice whispered, low and hollow, echoing from the depths of the house. "You have seen too much." The room felt as if it were collapsing around him, the shadows closing in. The figure took a step closer, its presence suffocating, pulling him toward an unspeakable darkness. Suddenly, Aaron's fingers brushed against the locket in his pocket. He held it up, and as he did, a faint, almost invisible light glowed from within. The figure recoiled, its form flickering like a shadow in the wind. For a brief moment, Aaron felt the weight around him lift, but as he moved toward the door, the figure's voice echoed, a threat that chilled him to his core. "You cannot escape. Not now. Not ever." Aaron stumbled out of the study, clutching the locket and gasping for air. He knew now that he was dealing with something far beyond a missing persons case. Ashford Manor was not just haunted. It was a prison, a trap for all who dared to uncover its secrets. And something told him that Clara was just the latest victim in a cycle that had been going on for far longer than he could imagine. Aaron barely paused to catch his breath as he stumbled out of the study, gripping the locket tightly. The deeper he went into Ashford Manor's mysteries, the more he realized he might be walking straight into a trap, one that had already claimed many before him. Yet, Clara's voice haunted his mind, pushing him onward. He had to find her, or at least find out what had happened to her. The hallways were suffocatingly silent as he moved forward, yet he felt he was being drawn to something, somewhere. As he descended the stairs, he noticed a hidden door slightly ajar behind an old, dusty tapestry. It hadn't been there before, or perhaps he hadn't noticed it in the mounting dread of the night. Pushing the door open, he found a narrow staircase leading downwards into the depths of the manor. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, but he pushed on, step by step, the air growing colder and heavier the deeper he went. At the bottom, he found himself in an underground chamber. The walls were lined with strange symbols, and the dim, flickering light cast eerie shadows. In the center of the chamber was a large stone altar, stained dark and surrounded by crumbling, ancient books. The scent of damp earth and something faintly metallic filled the air. Aaron approached the altar, his flashlight illuminating an assortment of objects scattered across it. A pair of glasses, an old watch, and a hair ribbon. Each item bore a name scratched onto its surface, and as he looked closer, he felt a chill run through him. These were personal belongings, relics of those who had disappeared in Ashford Manor over the years. He picked up a small ring with the initials CJ engraved inside, Clara James. His heart sank as he realized what this room was, a shrine to the lost, a place where the Watcher marked his victims. Suddenly, a low humming began to fill the chamber, growing louder and more insistent. Aaron looked around, his flashlight flickering, casting wild shadows that seemed to dance across the walls. The symbols etched into the stone seemed to pulse with a faint, sinister glow. The air thickened, and a figure began to emerge from the darkness. It was the same shadowy entity he had encountered upstairs, the Watcher. Its form shifted like smoke, but its hollow gaze was fixed upon him, filled with malice. "Why are you here?" it whispered, its voice like a hiss in his mind. "Why do you disturb the dead?" Aaron forced himself to stand his ground, though his heart pounded with terror. "I'm here for Clara. I know you've taken her. Where is she?" The Watcher laughed, a dark, hollow sound that echoed through the chamber. "Clara. She belongs to the manor now, as they all do. There's no escape from me, detective." As the Watcher advanced, Aaron backed away, his mind racing. Desperation drove him to pull out the locket once more, the small glow within it flaring brighter as he held it up. To his astonishment, the Watcher recoiled, its shadowy form flickering like a flame about to go out. Realizing the locket had some power against it, Aaron pressed forward, holding it high. "Let her go," he demanded, his voice trembling but firm. "You have no right to keep her here." The Watcher's form twisted in agony, its voice rising to a shriek. "Fool, you cannot break the bond that binds this place. I am eternal." In a last, desperate move, Aaron slammed the locket down on the altar. A blinding light burst from within, illuminating the entire chamber with a searing intensity. The symbols on the walls flared and then began to crack, splitting the stone like lightning bolts. The Watcher shrieked, its form disintegrating into a swirl of shadows that spun wildly before disappearing altogether. The light faded and silence fell over the chamber. Breathing hard, Aaron looked around, hoping to find some sign of Clara. But instead, he felt an odd weight in the air, as though something powerful had been released, or awakened. Just then, he heard a faint whisper echo through the chamber, softer than before. "Aaron." He turned and saw the faint outline of Clara, her form translucent and shimmering. She smiled, a sad but grateful expression on her face. "Thank you for freeing me." Before he could respond, her figure began to fade, disappearing into the darkness. Aaron felt a pang of sorrow, but also relief. He had freed Clara, saved her from whatever horrible fate the Watcher had in store. Yet, as he left the chamber, a nagging thought lingered. The Watcher was gone, but the manor was still alive, still filled with secrets, waiting to trap the next soul who dared to enter. And Aaron couldn't shake the feeling that the Watcher's last words were more than a warning. They were a promise. Aaron left the underground chamber, his thoughts heavy. He had freed Clara, but the dark aura of Ashford Manor lingered, pressing down on him like a weight he couldn't shake. The manor was alive, feeding on those it could trap, and Aaron knew his work here wasn't finished. Back in the dimly lit hallway, he noticed something strange. A painting on the wall that hadn't been there before. It was an old portrait, dust-covered and framed in tarnished gold. The image depicted a tall, stern man with piercing eyes, his face lined with an unsettling intensity. Something about his gaze felt disturbingly familiar, as though it followed Aaron wherever he moved. Aaron brushed the dust off the lower part of the frame and saw a small plaque with the name, Edgar Blackwood. Edgar Blackwood, the original owner of Ashford Manor and Eleanor's father. Aaron recalled bits of his research. Edgar had been a wealthy, influential man, known for his obsession with the occult. Rumors swirled that he'd gone mad before his death, that he'd sacrificed everything for power, including his own daughter, Eleanor. As Aaron studied the portrait, he noticed a faint glint in Edgar's painted eyes. He leaned in closer, drawn to a tiny, barely visible keyhole embedded in the frame. The shape and size matched the keyhole of Clara's locket. Without hesitation, Aaron took out the locket, his heart pounding as he carefully inserted it into the keyhole. The portrait emitted a faint click, and then, with a groan, the entire frame swung open, revealing a hidden doorway behind it. Taking a deep breath, Aaron stepped inside. The hidden room was small and cluttered, filled with dusty books, candles, and strange artifacts. In the center, an ancient, worn journal lay open on a small pedestal. The air felt thick and cold, pressing down with an almost physical force as he approached the journal, feeling a strange compulsion to read it. The journal was filled with Edgar's writings, documenting his descent into madness. Page after page, Edgar described his quest for power, his belief that he could achieve immortality by binding souls to Ashford Manor. He had experimented on servants, family members, even his own daughter, Eleanor. Aaron's hands shook as he read one particular entry. "The Watcher speaks to me. guiding me in my journey. He promises life beyond death, a power no mortal could possess, but the price is steep. My family's blood, the essence of their souls, must be bound to the manor. Their suffering will be my eternity. Aaron felt a wave of nausea. Edgar hadn't just become a madman. He'd made himself a part of the manor, feeding on the souls of those trapped within, using the Watcher as a conduit to bind them. He understood now that Edgar was the true darkness behind the Watcher, the puppet master who had twisted Ashford Manor into a nightmare. Just then, a gust of icy wind swept through the room, snuffing out the candles and plunging him into darkness. The door slammed shut behind him, trapping him inside. Aaron's flashlight flickered, casting sporadic light that barely pierced the shadows. A low, mocking laugh echoed through the room. "Did you think you could destroy me so easily, detective?" A voice hissed, chillingly close. It was Edgar's voice, dripping with malice. "I am this manor. I live in its walls, its shadows. I am everywhere." The walls seemed to close in, twisting and warping, as if the room were alive. Edgar's figure materialized from the darkness, his face twisted into a wicked grin. "You freed one soul, but the others remain, and now yours will join them." Aaron backed against the wall, heart racing. His mind spun, desperate to find a way out. The locket, his only weapon against the darkness, was still in his hand, but its glow was faint, as if Edgar's power was draining it. "Why?" Aaron demanded, his voice barely steady. "Why bind them here? Why trap so many?" Edgar's grin widened. "Because fear is power. Their terror binds them, keeps them close, fuels my existence, and now you'll be my latest source of power." Summoning every ounce of courage, Aaron raised the locket high. The faint light began to pulse, stronger this time, cutting through the darkness. Edgar recoiled, his form flickering. "No, you cannot defy me," Edgar bellowed, his voice blending with the wind that whipped around the room. Aaron closed his eyes, focusing on Clara's voice, her final plea for freedom. "This ends now, Edgar. You'll be trapped in your own darkness." With a surge of determination, he pressed the locket to the journal, and the room exploded with light. Edgar's scream echoed, filling the room as his form disintegrated, the shadows dissolving into ash. The locket burned hot in Aaron's hand, but he held tight, feeling its warmth drive away the cold. When the light faded, Aaron opened his eyes. The room was still, the walls no longer twisted or menacing. The journal had crumbled to dust, and the locket lay cold in his hand. The door creaked open, leading him back into the hallway, which was now bathed in an eerie, almost peaceful silence. But Aaron knew better. Edgar's presence might have been weakened, but the darkness in Ashford Manor was far from gone. As he walked down the corridor, he couldn't shake the feeling that Edgar was still watching, lurking in the manor's shadows, waiting for another chance to rise. Aaron left the hidden room behind the portrait, his senses on high alert. Every step he took echoed through the empty corridors, each shadow seeming to stretch and twist in unnatural ways. He had temporarily weakened Edgar's grip on the manor, but he knew that the dark force was far from defeated. Edgar Blackwood's presence was still woven into the very foundation of Ashford Manor. As Aaron turned the corner, he felt a sudden shift. A heavy silence blanketed the hallway, as if the air itself was holding its breath. Then, from the walls, faint whispers began to emerge, growing louder and forming eerie, overlapping voices. They were hushed, desperate, and filled with anguish. "Aaron," the voices seemed to call his name, pleading and sorrowful. He froze, his heart racing as he recognized some of the voices of those lost to the manor, including Clara's. They were trapped here, bound by Edgar's malevolent spirit, unable to move on. Taking a deep breath, Aaron pressed his hand against the wall, trying to feel any trace of the souls calling to him. Suddenly, a voice rang out, louder and clearer than the others. In the east wing, the mirror. It was Clara's voice, urgent and frightened. "He's hiding us there, trapped inside." Aaron's gaze snapped toward the eastern corridor. The east wing had been blocked off for years, labeled too dangerous for visitors due to structural decay, but now he understood why. Edgar had hidden his victims there, imprisoning their spirits in a place no one would disturb. With renewed determination, Aaron moved quickly toward the east wing. As he approached, a cold draft washed over him, carrying a faint, rotting scent. The walls seemed to shudder, and the whispers grew louder, urging him on. He reached a door covered in dust and grime. locked with a rusted padlock. Aaron took out the small iron key he'd found in Clara's locket earlier and inserted it into the lock. It clicked open with surprising ease, as though waiting for him all along. He pushed the door open and stepped into the forbidden east wing. The rooms here were decayed, cobwebs hanging from the ceiling and debris littering the floor. The air was thick and musty, but amidst the decay, Aaron felt an unmistakable energy, a presence lingering within these walls. He made his way down a narrow hallway until he reached a large, ornate mirror hanging on the far wall. The mirror was covered in dust, yet there was something hauntingly beautiful about it. Its surface was carved with intricate patterns, almost like symbols or runes. As Aaron wiped away the dust, he caught a glimpse of something moving within the glass. His reflection was distorted, but behind it he could see faint outlines of faces. Clara's, Eleanor's, and others he didn't recognize. They were trapped, their eyes wide with terror, silently pleading for freedom. Aaron placed his hand on the mirror's cold surface. "Clara," he whispered, his voice steady. "I'm here. I'll get you out." The glass suddenly grew colder, and a shadowy figure began to form within, growing clearer with each passing second. Edgar's face emerged, twisted with a malevolent smile. "Detective Hayes," Edgar sneered, his voice echoing from the mirror. "You're meddling in things far beyond your understanding." Aaron stood his ground, the locket in his grip. "Let them go, Edgar. Release these souls, or face the consequences." Edgar laughed, a dark, hollow sound that resonated through the hallway. "They are mine, bound to Ashford Manor for eternity. You cannot free them. They belong to me." Aaron felt a surge of anger, his grip tightening on the locket. "Then I'll find a way to end this, to destroy you once and for all." "Foolish man," Edgar spat. "Your own spirit will join theirs. You think you can defy me?" Aaron remembered the words in Eleanor's diary and the spells he'd glimpsed in Edgar's journal. He needed a symbol of love and courage to break Edgar's hold over the trapped souls. He raised the locket and held it to the mirror, focusing all his will and summoning Clara's memory. The locket glowed with a soft, warm light that pierced the mirror's surface, illuminating the trapped souls within. Edgar shrieked, his form flickering and distorting as the light overwhelmed him. Faces of the trapped souls grew brighter, their expressions turning from fear to hope. "Clara," Aaron whispered, feeling her presence growing stronger. "You're free now, all of you, be free." As Aaron made his way through the now silent corridors of Ashford Manor, he felt the oppressive weight that had suffocated the air for so long was finally lifting. The whispers were gone. The walls no longer seemed to breathe with malice, and the lingering shadows appeared no more than what they were, simple, ordinary shadows. But the uneasy calm that settled over the manor felt temporary. Aaron sensed that something was waiting, a final piece of the puzzle left unsolved. Just as he reached the foyer, ready to leave the manor behind, a low creak echoed from above him, drawing his attention to the grand staircase. There, at the top of the stairs, stood a figure, a woman in a simple, pale dress. It was Edgar Blackwood. Her expression was solemn, her eyes filled with an emotion Aaron couldn't quite place. She lifted a hand, motioning for him to come closer. Against his better judgment, Aaron ascended the stairs, each step filling him with a strange sense of dread and anticipation. When he reached her, Eleanor spoke, her voice soft yet carrying an urgency that sent chills down his spine. "Thank you for freeing us, Detective. But I must warn you, Ashford Manor's darkness may be lifted, but it will never be fully gone." Aaron looked at her, confused. "I thought Edgar's spirit was defeated. His hold on this place, it's over, isn't it?" Eleanor shook her head slowly. "Edgar's spirit was bound to the manor, yes. But there is more to Ashford Manor than just his cruelty. This place has absorbed the suffering and fear of every soul it's ever touched. It has become a part of the very foundation." Aaron's eyes widened as he realized the implications. "So, anyone who comes here, they will feel its presence, its hunger." Eleanor continued, her voice carrying an ancient sadness. "The manor may no longer have Edgar's control, but it still remembers. It still craves, in its own way." She reached into the folds of her dress and handed Aaron a small object, a shard of glass from the shattered mirror. "Take this. As long as you hold on to it, you'll carry a piece of the manor's darkness. It will keep the house from trying to call you back, but it comes with a price." Aaron stared at the shard, feeling its cold weight in his hand. He knew he couldn't leave it behind, but he also sensed that holding onto it meant carrying the lingering energy of Ashford Manor wherever he went. "Why give this to me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor's gaze softened. "Because you're the only one who truly understood its darkness and still chose to help. But remember, this shard isn't just a burden, it's also a key. Should the manor ever call again, you'll have the means to protect yourself, or return to face it, should anyone else fall prey to its shadows." Aaron nodded, pocketing the shard. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything." Eleanor's form began to fade, her expression serene. "Farewell, Aaron. You've given us peace. Now I hope you find it for yourself." With those final words, Eleanor disappeared, leaving Aaron standing alone on the grand staircase. For a long moment, he stared at the empty space where she had stood, his mind racing with questions about what he had just experienced. Finally, he descended the stairs, crossing the threshold of Ashford Manor and feeling the chill of the night air as he stepped outside. He turned back, glancing one last time at the ominous silhouette of the mansion. It stood silent, dark, and still, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching him, waiting for the next visitor to enter its grasp. As he walked down the path and away from the estate, he thought of the shard in his pocket, a final connection to Ashford Manor, a reminder of the horrors he had witnessed and the lives he had helped to free. He couldn't help but wonder if, one day, the manor would need him again. And in the quiet of the night as he walked away, he heard a faint whisper carried by the wind. "Come back, Aaron, someday." It had been nearly a year since Aaron Hayes had walked away from Ashford Manor, leaving behind its cursed walls, haunted whispers, and the souls he'd freed from Edgar Blackwood's twisted grasp. Life had resumed its familiar rhythm. He had buried himself in work, hoping that the nightmares would fade, but the eerie memories clung to him. Late at night, he still felt the manor's pull, a faint, persistent tug that refused to let him forget. One stormy evening, a single letter arrived at his door bearing no return address. Aaron's pulse quickened as he opened it. The letter was written in a rushed, frantic scrawl. "Detective Hayes, they say Ashford Manor is abandoned, but someone is there. Lights flicker at odd hours, strange figures appear in the windows, and people hear screams. I don't know if it's real, but they say the manor wants you back. Please, help us. Come quickly before it's too late." The message ended without a signature. Aaron read it over, feeling a chill coil in his chest. He had vowed never to return, yet the letter seemed almost alive in his hands, the words pulsing with a kind of urgency that he couldn't ignore. Against his better judgment, he knew he had no choice. He took a deep breath, pocketed the shard from the mirror, the one Eleanor had given him as protection, and set out on the familiar, winding road back to Ashford Manor. As he approached the estate, a heavy mist clung to the ground, veiling the manor's ominous silhouette. The mansion loomed larger than he remembered, its broken windows like empty, soulless eyes. But this time, something was different. Flickering lights shone from within, casting distorted shadows that danced along the walls. The front door, which had always creaked open reluctantly in the past, swung wide as he approached, as if the manor itself was eager to let him in. He stepped inside, feeling an oppressive chill that gnawed at his bones. The familiar whispers began, soft at first, then building in intensity. "Welcome back, detective," a voice murmured, one he instantly recognized. It was Edgar Blackwood. Aaron's hand tightened around the shard in his pocket as he called out, "I destroyed you, Edgar. You have no power here anymore." A mocking laugh echoed through the hallways, bouncing off the walls. "You think a mere shard of glass can protect you? You may have freed the others, but I am bound to this house. The manor is my soul, my prison, my power. And now, it will be yours too." Suddenly, the doors slammed shut, sealing Aaron inside. The lights dimmed, casting everything in a sickly green glow. Aaron felt the walls pressing in, warping as Edgar's dark energy infused every inch of the house. The air was thick, alive with malevolence, and each step felt heavier than the last. He made his way to the grand staircase, remembering how he had freed the trapped souls from the mirror. But as he climbed, an overwhelming sense of dread washed over him, as if each step pulled him deeper into the manor's grip. The walls pulsed, almost like a heartbeat, each beat growing louder, consuming him. At the top of the stairs, he saw it. A large, polished mirror, identical to the one he had shattered. His own face reflected back, pale and drawn. But behind him, dark figures began to materialize, their faces twisted in agony, the remnants of those who had fallen prey to Edgar's endless hunger. He heard Eleanor's voice again, faint yet clear. "Aaron, the shard. Use it to break the curse once and for all. It's the only way to stop him." Summoning every ounce of his strength, Aaron took the shard from his pocket and pressed it to the mirror's surface. The glass rippled as if it were water, and the dark figures twisted and writhed, their tortured faces turning to him, eyes filled with desperation. Edgar's face appeared in the mirror, furious. "You dare defy me again? You'll be mine, just like the others." But Aaron held firm, feeling the shard grow warm in his hand, pulsing with a power that seemed to draw from the souls he'd saved. He focused all his energy, channeling the hope and courage he'd felt from Eleanor and the others. "Your time is over, Edgar," Aaron shouted. "This ends now." With one final thrust, he drove the shard deeper into the mirror's surface. The mirror cracked, sending fractures racing outward, and a blinding light burst from within. Edgar's scream filled the manor, louder and more terrible than anything Aaron had heard. The walls trembled, and the very foundation of the manor seemed to shake as the light consumed the darkness within. The figures in the mirror began to dissolve, their expressions shifting from terror to relief as they faded into the light. Edgar's form shattered, disintegrating into nothingness as the curse he had cast on Ashford Manor finally broke. The mirror exploded into dust, filling the air with shimmering particles that drifted through the room. Aaron stood in the center, feeling an immense peace settle over him, a silence that felt almost holy. The weight, the darkness, and the whispers were gone, leaving Ashford Manor empty at last. He turned and made his way down the stairs, his footsteps light as the manor released him, its doors opening without resistance. As he crossed the threshold and looked back one final time, he saw the house differently. It stood there, no longer brooding or menacing, but silent and still, an empty shell, finally free of Edgar's twisted soul. Aaron took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his journey lift. He knew he would never return to Ashford Manor, but he left with the satisfaction that the horrors within had been put to rest for good. As he walked away, the wind picked up, carrying with it the faintest hint of a whisper, this time calm and content. "Thank you, Aaron." And with that, Detective Aaron Hayes left Ashford Manor for the last time, the nightmare finally over, and peace restored to the haunted halls that would now remain silent forever.